Hello viewers, tonight I am going to be doing a video response to this particular ministry, this particular woman. Her name is, I believe her name is 𝒂𝓁𝒅𝓁, a Slavic name. She may be Russian or Ukrainian. Anyhow, she did a video about women. Basically, she did a video that was basically based upon a verse in Corinthians, and then it sort of went into other directions, some of which were very obscure. She said that she hopes that she is not condemned or so persecuted for this video or something of the sort, which seems quite ridiculous. I know a lot of these YouTubers call themselves ministries, but the truth is all of these people are just YouTubers with opinions. They have comment forums. They can cut their comment forums off. They don't need to provide their full name in public. All right? They don't need to do any of that. They don't even need to show their faces. Oh, I'm going to be condemned for this message. No, you're just a YouTuber with an opinion. And there are going to be people, she was talking about, oh, people are so aggressive about this issue. Well, they are. Truth be told, different churches have different traditions. This is nothing new. I know that what she is saying is actually right and historical in the sense that there have always been women who have had varying degrees of functions even in the Old Testament. There was a female judge even in the book of Judges, I believe. So, in sooth, this is not some big news to anyone who really is sort of knowledgeable about any of this. However, I saw some of that old sort of residual Eastern Orthodox bias against their hated enemies, the Western Europeans, and even the United States, because we too are part of that same Western type church. Our church is a Western. We live here in the Western world. I don't know if she is in Russia or the Ukraine. I do believe by her English, as good as it is, that she probably is not in either the United States, the United Kingdom, or somewhere not in sort of in Eastern Europe or Greece or anywhere such as that. She has a Slavic name. Anyhow, her video was fine. She is not receiving persecution for this. I'm simply going to correct something that she basically sort of framed. She framed Tertullian as though he was a Western father, or Western church father, and said, oh, well, this is the difference between him and the early church fathers. And I thought, this is not accurate. This is not accurate. And if you watch the video, you will see what I did. She was basically trying to frame Tertullian as some type of sexist, as some type of anti-female person. I'm thinking, wow, this sounds like something an Eastern Orthodox would say, because most of them have so much to say about. And the truth is that our Textus Receptus, for most of our Bibles, to be honest, which isn't necessarily, I mean, that's based on particular, all of those manuscripts. For example, our Textus Receptus Bibles are similar, very similar to Eastern Orthodox Bibles. So what is she talking about, East and West, in regard to all of that? Yes, Tertullian was the founder of Latin Christianity. She then brings up the Montanus at some point. She starts talking about Montanism. She starts to talk about Montanism at some point. And I'm not even going to get into the subject of men and women teaching. People can do what they want. I don't care. You can take any of these verses however you want. It doth not matter to me. If you don't think it's right, don't do it. If you think it's right, do it. This is just a woman with a YouTube channel. I don't see it as anything more than that. And frankly, when you have a comment section, you should know this. You are going to see all types of different people in your comment sections. A lot of Christian channels cut their comment sections off, which I think is a terrible idea, but it is this idea, oh, I'm going to be persecuted for telling these terrible, aggressive people that... Listen, you know, the very fact that she is speaking shows that no one is persecuting her or forcing her to do anything. What I am interested in is this narrative that she is framing about Tertullian. Because in that video, she separates Tertullian as though Tertullian is not an early church father. Tertullian, you don't even have to do very much research. Tertullian was an ante-Nicene church father. That is to say, before the Council of Nicaea. Tertullian was an early church father. All right, this is obvious. So what she starts to say, what she basically was saying in this video, the way she was talking about Tertullian, it was almost as though she was acting as though Tertullian was not even an early church father. So, oh, Tertullian, this is the Western church father. Yes, he was an early church father who was in the West. This is and some of you may not recognize it, there are a lot of Slavic people, whether they are Protestant now or not, whether they are, because if you are not part of the Byzantine Church or the Roman Church, and I call it the Byzantine Church, and I call Orthodox Christians Byzantinus. However, if you are not part of the Greek or Roman Church, essentially, you are a Protestant. Some people like to say, I'm non-denominational, and so forth and so on. That type of stuff, we hear it often. However, one of the problems that some of us Christians, some of us spiritual Israelites have, happens to be, there are a lot of Slavic people now who are teaching. People in the United States, people throughout Western Europe, they're involved now in ministries that are teaching English-speaking peoples. And I have to tell you all, watch very closely for that old Eastern bias. And frankly, she should not even be speaking about really this matter of manuscripts. She was talking about manuscripts when she was using the King James Bible. You could get a Bible that frankly is more in line with your understanding of a sort of accurate manuscript. You could get the ESV or something. Some of the matters that she is talking about is in regard to the reliability of Scripture. I use the King James Bible. She is using the King James Bible. But you see, the very manuscript that you have to go to find out some of the changes, or at least in terms of Greek, that she is talking about, they come from a different manuscript. She is talking about some very tangential things regarding that. However, I do not want to get off topic, to be honest. But right now, she's sort of talking about things that she already knows. You know when you talk about this issue of women, because frankly, the ultimate question always is, can the women preach or not? Should the women be preachers or not? And truth be told, people should just say it. Well, this may not be traditional, but if you want to do it, you can. If you don't want to do it, you don't need to do it. If you believe in that, all right, that's fine. If you don't believe in it, all right, that's fine. If people have different traditions. She is acting as though this is some type of terrible situation. But if it was so terrible, if the Christian community was so divided as she says, she would not have 52,000 subscribers. She would not have over 52,600 subscribers. All right? She would not. That's just obvious. Okay, so obviously women can speak. We live in the modern age now, and truth be told, in regard to women speaking and sort of women's conduct in the church setting, all of this is it's different than it used to be several hundred, even 1,000 years ago. There's a different culture back then. She's going through all of this scripture and other things. She's going to Abraham Publications, which is a Christian Science website. Abraham Publications is, I mean, this particular website itself, people have been asking themselves, how reliable is Abraham Publications? She's not using Blue Letter Bible. These people promote a specific type of Christian doctrine that is at odds with many people's doctrine. She provided some Greek translations of some words from Abraham Publications. I do not trust Abraham Publications. A lot of us Christians do not trust Abraham Publications. They say, for example, when you go to the website, they say the Bible is all about science. It's not about religion. They have nothing to do with dogma. Dogma is a word that means precept, faith, belief, an idea that you accept. So obviously, what is knowledge without faith? Obviously, if you know something, if you have intelligence, that is unified with faith. These people want to act as though there's some type of sort of scientific alternative to more fundamental Christians and Christianity. All you have to do is come to their website and learn what they have to say. So these scholars, or whoever these individuals are, they have their own biases. All right, listen, I'm not saying that you can read their website for yourself. This is the source that she is using for some of these. Even their definitions are biased. If you don't believe me, I mean, look at what they wrote for the name 𝒹𝑒𝓁. They said humanity progresses not because of the efforts of people, but because humanity is part of the universe, which progresses by natural law. Human prosperity goes hand in hand with convention. That increases because the mental equivalent of the second law of thermodynamics, the fruits of, this is the name 𝒹𝑒𝓁, all right? Fruits of effort, the fruits of the efforts of people is a consequence, not a cause of progress. Humanity, science, and technology progresses for the same reason why your cup of tea gets cold, which is very reminiscent of Hegel's views of progress. The doctrines they promote are very specific, and look, you can't find that particular article anywhere. This is not necessarily a Christian website. They're introducing you to quantum mechanics and chaos theory. All right. This is where she's getting her definitions. Why could she not go to a place such as Blue Letter Bible, a thoroughly Christian website, a website where they are not basically providing you their own sort of, I mean, I just simply do not understand it, to be honest. All right? I simply do not. But she had some things to say about particular verses. She was using big words like Pauline interpolation and so forth, talking about how, oh, well, if you read these Western Bibles, nearly every person in the West is reading a Western Bible. What are you talking about, Layla? I mean, you're quoting a Western Bible. On your website, the very same type of Bible that you apparently have a problem with. You're telling us that we cannot really trust what we read. How do we practice this? Basically, we have to get an ESV to basically, or else we need a whole Greek lexicon, because apparently the words that I'm not even going to get in that argument. This is about Tertullian. Basically, I wanted to talk about one thing, and that is Tertullian. In this video, she decided to talk about Montanism, and she decided to say, well, Montanism was so good, there were men and women involved in the church, and that is true. However, the problem with her going into a little tangent where she's saying, oh, Tertullian, he was trying to masculinize the church and trying to defeminize it. He was a misogynist. He was sexist. It's a sexist church. The Western church is a sexist church. Well, peradventure, she could say something about Eastern Orthodoxy, because if you have to be saying that in regard to a comparison, there's East and West. We have the Western church and we have the Eastern church. She did not say very much about the Eastern church, but she is Slavic, And in all likelihood, she has a sort of familial history and perhaps her own history of being Eastern Orthodox. So, I mean, this is all very strange. Anyhow, Tertullian became a Montanist. So why would he join a movement that had about 8 woman office holders? All right, he's so anti-female, but he became part of the group that you like so much. You decide to say, oh, he was a Western church father. He wasn't an early church father. Well, he was. He was an before the Council of Nicaea church father. So this is that old, some of you may not realize the significance of this. This is an old grudge that Slavic people and Eastern Orthodox people have against the Western Church and Western Christians. We know it. I mean, this is some old little spiteful stuff. That is why it is so lowly. I do not even really feel like giving even a really proper response to this, because her video, you can tell it's full of emotion. It's full of emotion is not necessarily a bad thing, but you can tell it's passion. There's real suffering in this video. And for what, you would ask? Well, this has to do with that old sort of Eastern Orthodox Russian, sort of Slavic and Greek spite against Western Christians. Oh, your Bibles, well, they inserted things in Corinthians and so forth and so on. Yet you're teaching an English-speaking audience, which would necessarily be called the sort of Western church that you were criticizing. You are basically misrepresenting things. Tertullian joined this group, the Montanists. Tertullian joined them, but if you want to go into detail about why, this group sort of dropped off, they followed these prophets of the Montanist prophets who were claiming it was going to be the end of the world. They were claiming that Jesus was coming back, and they had set dates, but when eventually the date didn't come. So these people, the reason they are no longer here is because they were false prophets. All right? There's false prophets even today. When people go around saying they are prophets, and the dates that they set don't come to pass, many of those groups grow in disrepute, and people start to say, yeah, that was a group of heretics. All right? I mean, so the group you were talking about that was so good, oh, there's male and female members. Well, there's always been male and female members in certain churches. They are not all the same. Not all Western churches are the same. If you talk about the Waldensians, for example, they had females in particular positions in their churches. All right? So when you talk about anything being a tradition, you have to realize the West has many traditions. The West is not only the Catholic Church, not to mention the history of female mystics. Now, I myself am not a Catholic, but when you're talking about the Western Church and what Bibles we use and what manuscripts we use and take advantage of, the Textus Receptus, all of that, you have to realize that, when you are just broadly saying things, oh, Tertullian, he was so bad, and I'm thinking, wow, here we go. A Slavic woman has something against a North African. No surprise. But anyhow, it all just seems very biased. It seems very ridiculous because she's not taking into account a number of things. When you talk about Tertullian, many of us, when we think about Tertullian, we think about Montanism because he became one. He became a Montanist. All right? So this idea, well, he's anti-female, but he joined the group that was known to have both men and women in their group. The reason that they fell off, the reason that they fell out of popularity is because their prophets and prophetesses, they made some prophecies. Did they come to pass? Just like today, you have people all over YouTube who call themselves Christians. They make prophecies, and when their words do not align with reality, those people start to lose popularity. Which is why many of us are very skeptical of anyone going around saying, I'm a prophet, I'm a prophetess. All right? We sort of ask the question, that is interesting. I sure do hope that what you say comes to pass, or else that would make you a false prophet. This is just obvious. So some of us, listen, we already know there are people in the Eastern Church, there are Slavic people who have been brought up like this. They have something against Tertullian. They have something against that North African man. They have something against my fellow brother. Okay? But anyhow, I mean, I have to say, this is just par for the course, so to speak. We expect Eastern Orthodox people and, people with biases against Western people in general to have a problem with Tertullian. I mean, apparently, he founded Latin Christianity. He messed up the manuscripts and all of this talk. For example, this is just as I say. If you compare the Textus Receptus, apparently our Textus Receptus is very similar to the Eastern Orthodox canon. So, frankly, we have a very reliable Bible for the most part. So here we have from this particular quote here, the New Testament used by the Orthodox Church is the patriarchal text, which is a form of the Byzantine text. As you would expect, the patriarchal text is closer to the Textus Receptus than it is to the majority text or the Alexandrian text. So, frankly, as far as Bibles go, apparently ours is similar to that Eastern Bible. So, frankly, I look at the Greek sometimes. I look at different Bible versions sometimes. But I use the same Bible that she uses on her website. Alright? But, all of this talk about Tertullian, he's not here's the difference between an early church father and a Western church father. No, he's an early church father. He is a Western church father who is of the early church. This is well known. So the whole demarcation between him and other people is ridiculous. She was talking about the church being sexist, all types of things. Which, that's all a matter of opinion. Back in those days, they didn't really use words like that. Can you imagine going back in those days and calling someone sexist? Can you imagine it? Jesus called a woman a dog. Okay, he said, do not throw some crumbs to the dogs or something of that sort. Okay, I guess that's sexist too. There's a lot of, if it is a matter of importance and we are going to say, hey, we have to defend the Bible or come to a defense of the Bible and say it's not sexist, and we have to go through the Greek and prove it's not sexist, and we have to prove certain parts are not sexist. Well, if that is the attempt, you've already lost. I am not going to do it. I acknowledge the differences in culture, and a lot of you should do it. How can you take today's cultural standards of sexism and misogyny and apply it to today? How can you do it? So, I think people should just, there's no problem with study of, manuscripts or anything, but what she said was an outright lie. She was talking about Tertullian as some type of sort of famous misogynist, which this is the first time I've heard this argument. She was going to Abraham Publications, getting information, and I was just wondering why. This is not a website that has any sort of good reputation. She's talking about other people, of which I don't necessarily disagree with. Alright, she did some good call-outs. She called out Dory Love. She called out a few other people like David Lynn and so forth. calling out these men. This is the but at the same time, she also is making mistakes. If you are going to say, oh, well, he's anti-female, but he's joining a group where there's male and female members, and those females have a prominent role in that particular church movement, the Montanism. All right, in that particular prophetic movement, because that is what it was. Montanism was a prophetic movement, and the idea, the sort of question that is asked of every prophetic movement is this: are their prophecies true? What they say, will it come to pass? If they set dates and they say such and such is going to happen, Jesus is going to come back, and they say he's coming back on this day, and he doesn't come back, and people say, you said he was going to come back on that day, and he didn't. She was basically promoting Montanism as some type of good thing, and saying that, oh, Western Christianity by and large is a bad thing. All right? Because we're all using these same Bibles, and if they are not reliable, we will just have to stop using them. But her talk about Tertullian, I sort of understood that as some type of old, deep, ancient, ethnic hatred that a lot of Slavic people and a lot of Eastern Orthodox people have for Western Christians and Western Christianity and so forth. It's this sort of old Catholic Eastern Orthodox thing. And she may be a Protestant. However, this is a very old cultural thing. And she may not even realize that she is doing it herself. However, I just have to correct this. Tertullian was an early church father. If you think you're going to make a demarcation between Tertullian and other early church fathers and say that Tertullian was not a Western church, an early church father, he was some type of different individual who was sort of, not included in the category of before Nicene, anti-Nicene, I just think that is ridiculous. So frankly, this is not a condemnation. This is not a persecution. Frankly, I agree with you. There were many early churches and sort of traditions of having females engage in all types of functions. That is not the problem. However, you said some things. I could respond to them in another video. However, I do not even feel like it. Because to me, it seems as though, it would just be, when I see that you're using a King James Bible and you could use another Bible, because you say there's problems with the manuscripts. Why are you using a King James Bible? Because some of the changes that you apparently are talking about are not in certain Bibles like the ESV. They're not using the Textus Receptus, so you could use another Bible. Because this particular manuscript, you told us to go to the Greek. However, if we go to the Greek, we will get the Greek that our King James Bible was translated from. And it is going to say, is going to have those sort of Pauline interpolations and so forth, so we would have to go to the other Greek codexes and manuscripts that you mentioned. And we would have to do that for just about every single sort of, variation that we find that is problematic in the New Testament. All right? So for us, many of us are using the King James, and that's a whole nother discussion. However, what I want to talk about is the fact that this whole thing about Tertullian, calling him an anti-feminine, sort of anti-female person, a misogynist, saying, oh, the church was sexist. Why are you applying these terms in a historical manner? These terms were not applied back then. People did not care about those terms. Do you think that people were caring about how sexist they were? Okay. To me, do you think there were people back then, in those days, saying, I'm so misogynistic? We live in a different time. We live in a different culture. People do different things now. And there are some things in the Bible that, frankly, if you compare them to today's standards, yes, they are sexist. They are misogynistic. That is just a reality. I am not going to reject them because of that. This is just the truth. I mean, if you want to apply those new terms about females being treated differently, well, you would have to acknowledge that in some cases females have some very, different gender roles, so to speak. I mean, you can call it whatever you want. This was just something obvious back then, and that is not to say there were not females involved in different churches. There were. And there were other churches, in which it wasn't. And for the most part, you can look at the history of Calvinism, Catholicism, the Waldensians, the Cathars. Western church history is so much deeper than you think it is. And, you said a lot of this with a good deal of confidence. However, you're coming at this from a position of a person who really does not know as much as many of us. Because we're Western. You're looking at this from the perspective of a person who probably has family who is Eastern Orthodox, and probably, you have the sort of ancient resentment against sort of the way we do things here in the West. But it seems like you're either in the West or you're in some country that is not a Slavic country because you're speaking that English so well. So, honestly, I do not know. Take it, I just want you to take from this that yes, Tertullian became a Montanist. Montanism had female members in it who were in leadership positions, office holders. All right? So, in your zeal to sort of disprove Tertullian, you did not take into account and tell us that, he was involved in Montanism. He became a Montanist. All right? Tertullian is not just some one-dimensional individual. Yes, he was an early church father, and he had a lot of influence. But you saying he's a sexist and misogynistic, you could say that of a lot of people. All right? No one's persecuting you for your video. You have your comment section open. You can cut that off. If people are emailing you, you can sort of change your email. It is ridiculous to see people act as though somehow they're receiving serious persecution for just stating simple things on the internet. If you state these things on the internet, yes, some people are going to disagree with you. Some people are going to say, oh, woman shouldn't do this, woman shouldn't do that. If she was receiving so much persecution, she would have more than just 22 dislikes. All right, 22 dislikes. Excuse me. She has over 1,500 views here. So this to me is just a game. This is more YouTube drama stuff that people like to promote and push and say, oh, people are coming after me. People are coming after me. They said I said women should, have more of a role in the church. And there's a history of women with a role in the church in Western churches. If you don't know anything about the female mystics of the West, and sure, some of them were even martyrs. But, some of them, not all of them were, but, it's just the whole history of the Western church is more complex than what you were saying it is. There was, Teresa of Avila or something, I believe. Let me take a look. Okay, there were people like this who were famous. Now, I'm not a Catholic, but I have to, because you're talking about Western Christianity and the Western Church and so forth as a whole. You're not really specifying. You're not really saying Catholicism or anything. So I should expect, since you're talking about the Western manuscripts and all of these things, you're talking about just Western Bibles in general. And I suppose, we should be using an Eastern Orthodox Bible or something like that, even though we know, we just read Eastern Orthodox Bibles in the Textus Receptus, whatever manuscript they have, are similar. So, as far as the problem is concerned, I really do not understand it. I really do not understand it. Yes, there were females in the Western Church who did have roles, of authority, so to speak. All right? There were men who were influenced by Teresa of Avila. All right? Such as Miguel de Molinos. He was influenced by Teresa of Avila. All right? But let me see. Who was I going to search? To be honest, I've almost forgotten. To be honest. Because, wasn't there the Carmelite order? Because if I have to talk about this, I have to also talk about the Roman Church, because she's talking about the Western Church in general, it seems. Okay, you have the Carmelite order. That is an order for women, for men and women. Okay, so it's a mendicant religious order. So this idea, it's so anti-female. Females don't have any role at all. They're not in, positions of leadership. They're not doing things. To me, it was like a broken record. This sounded exactly like some Eastern Orthodox Slavic hater. She sounded like a hater. All of the stuff about Tertullian, most of which, she was telling us to research ourselves. No, you said something about Tertullian. Please prove that somehow he was conspiring to basically create some type of sort of Western church that was anti-female, even though the man joined a group that had females in leadership positions, that had prophetesses. I just simply do not understand it. It seems very confusing to me, and I would just be honest, I do not necessarily disagree with her about the whole women being in the church historically. Yes, women have been in the church historically. Who is arguing about that? Who are the aggressive people? Show us their comments. Show us these super aggressive people who are coming after you for being a female and teaching. This is your YouTube channel. You can teach whatever you want. But the drama, the sort of I don't know how you would say this. This is just sort of a stoking of drama. Just saying, hey, woe is me. People in my comment section are persecuting me for teaching. And I'm thinking, yeah, you can block them. You can delete their comments. If you have an email that they're sort of abusing, you can sort of change that or block people. You can do so many things. This is YouTube. This is not some type of situation where people are coming after you with torches and pitchforks like a witch or anything of that sort because you're teaching. This is YouTube. People have different opinions. There may be rude and very sort of awful people come around and say, oh, you're teaching, this is terrible. So what? You can tell them to kick rocks. It's just ridiculous. But anyhow, frankly, the main reason I made this video was about Tertullian. I have to clarify, yes, he was an early church father. And, the way she was talking about him, she was saying, oh, this Western church father, in comparing him to the early church father, well, he was one of them. So, what is your point? Okay? I saw bias in that. Frankly. And I know how a lot of Eastern Orthodox and Slavic people basically, because most of them are Eastern Orthodox and they have, most of them have a bias against Tertullian. This is just what I've observed. So anyhow, I just had to set the record straight. I just had to say, yes, Tertullian is an early church father, and yes, that group that you were giving so much praise to, he did join. You don't have to do very much research to it to know that Tertullian became a Montanist. You could just go to Wikipedia. So if he was so anti-female, he was a defender of their prophecies. And if some of their prophets were women, you would ask the question, why would he become one? Why? Why would he do that? I thought he was anti-female. I thought he was misogynistic. Why are you even applying these terms to people who lived hundreds of years ago? Thousands of years ago? You're applying these terms, misogyny and sexism, to people who in all likelihood would not care. It's just to be honest. I mean, culture is more multifaceted than you think. This isn't like all of a sudden the Western churches were just totally biased against females and their roles are just sort of restricted, which in some sense they were to a degree because they had specific roles that, that sort of men did. In regard to positions, that's different with different churches that you go to. If you go to a Quaker church, they don't even call it a church, they call it a meeting house, the Society of Friends. They don't even have in some cases, they don't even have sermons. You just go in the meeting house and you just sit down and pray. You just stay in silent prayer. Some of those churches have priests, or rather pastors, but some of those Quaker churches are literally you're just praying. So Western Christianity is far more extensive than you think. And yes, these are the same people who are using the King James Bible, who are using the Textus Receptus, which apparently, according to you, has so many flaws, yet not enough that you're not using it, which is interesting considering you could get a Bible more amenable to your views, to your understanding of Scripture. Since you think it is so flawed, you could easily get an ESV and quote from that, but you're quoting from a KJV. You could solve this problem. It is so cumbersome to think that somehow you're going to have to go to a completely different Greek manuscript. I have no problem checking for the Greek manuscript that my Bible is based on. But for me to go outside of the Bible that, and I'm not even saying that that's a bad thing. If I was reading the ESV, I would like to read the Greek that is based on. But basically, that has to be a personal decision. This idea that for some reason, you people who are from the Western churches, you people, you Protestants and you Catholics and other people, you're using the wrong Bible, even though it's similar to the Eastern Orthodox Bible. The Textus Receptus is similar to that manuscript. So wherein lieth the problem? Honestly. Personally, I just saw a lot of bias in this video. To me, I don't see very many people, at least that I know, who are saying, women can't do certain things. You can do what you want. And I think that should be the message. We live in a different time now. Paul was telling women to cover their heads when they pray and prophesy. How many women cover their heads when they pray and prophesy? How many people would say, Paul is sexist. He told me to cover my head when I pray and prophesy. He said long hair is a glory to a woman and short hair is a glory to a man. How many men do we know that have long hair and they go to churches? How many women who go to these churches have short hair? So, frankly, he had his own ideas. It was a different time then. The things that people would say back then, people would say, that's sexist. If a man this is terrible. That's sexist. That's misogynistic. He said woman, glory, a woman with long hair, that's glory to her. And she has to, cover her head when she prays. How many women are doing that? How many? You have to realize that to say, the Bible, I can prove it's not sexist, I just have to go to the Greek. I think, honestly, people should just accept that there are cultural differences between now and then. You are not going to sort of absolve the Bible of all of the sexism and misogyny that you see in society. You simply are not going to do it, because those terms were not being applied in the context in which they are being applied now. People did not even have them. Who was talking about sexism hundreds, if not thousands of years ago? Who was? To me, that just was surprising, and I just thought, wow, lady, I mean, I understand her. She did make a good point. There are many traditions of women, particular churches and particular church traditions, even within the Catholic Church, the so-called Roman Church. I can probably point to some things in the Byzantine Church, the so-called Eastern Orthodox Church. But, just like I said, you can look at the Carmelite order that accepts men and women. They have different mendicant orders for men and women. Now, whether you agree with the Roman Church or not is immaterial. She is talking about church history in general. But let's look at this. Because if she's talking about Western manuscripts and Western churches, we have to look at everything. So if Quaker women in regard to the church, they have a history of having women, ministers between 1685 and 1835, Okay, so they have a history of having women involved, in particular capacities. All of these churches have their own traditions. That is the point. Some churches are sort of stricter about that, some are not. But honestly, I have to just say that this is not a big thing. Bringing sexism into a discussion about the Bible is sort of ridiculous in my opinion, and I will always believe that. To me, I do not even regard sexism when I am reading anything in the Bible, because they're new terms. If you read it long enough and you go to certain parts, they're going to be undeniably what you may call sexist. So, to me, no. I think that's fairly obvious. Anyhow, this video's gone on long enough. Frankly, it really has. It is probably going to be very much of a rambling video. But anyhow, this is nothing against you, Layla. But frankly, I just had to inform you, yes, Tertullian is an early church father. You can say he's a Western church father, but he is indeed an early church father. The way you were talking, you sort of made it seem as though, wait, he's different than these other fathers. And that's just not true. Okay? Anyhow, may all of you be blessed, and farewell.